Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Heritage Foundation think tank in Washington, D.C. at the conclusion of a tremendous event talking about relations between Japan and South Korea, tensions obviously rising between the two countries. And it's my honor to be talking to one of CSIS's great minds from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Matt Goodman, who is Vice President there for Asia, Asian economics, and also political economics more broadly. Matt, talk to us a little bit about the stakes of the U.S.-China trade dispute. On the global economy. We've got Brexit going on right now. We have these Japan-South Korea tensions, which you guys discussed in tremendous detail. Bruce Klingner here hosting the event. What's at stake in this trade war that's been percolating and escalating, and is as much about the national security, great power competition between the United States and China as it is economics?
Yeah, I mean, look, the global economy is slowing, and it's subject to a lot of risk, and those risks center around this problem of U.S.-China trade, competition, and competition more broadly. And remember, U.S. and China are the two largest economies in the world, sort of by far, and if we are in a trade war or diminishing our chances for growth, it's going to hurt the rest of the world as well. And a lot of people are very concerned about this around the world. The IMF has been sounding the clarion sound about call about how damaging this could be. It could really detract from global growth, and we need to pull back and sort of cooler heads need to prevail here. The twist in the last week of President Trump adding additional tariffs or threatening to do that in September, and then China letting its currency drop, which then prompted a response from President Trump that he had apparently been wanting to do for a long time, to call them a currency manipulator, I think has added a new dimension and made this a lot more troubling.
And what's the way for both sides to climb down from this? Because tensions obviously are running high, on security front on almost every metric. What's the elegant way for both sides to climb down, given that both have been relying on their nationalistic basis to actually propel this forward?
Well, on one level, this is going to be very hard because these are deeply structural problems in our economic relationship and obviously in our broader relationship. I think it's not inappropriate to say that we're in a period of strategic competition here. Now, as an economist, by the way, since a lot of your audience are not economists but defense people, the word competition doesn't necessarily bother me. It's what gets me up in the morning and wants me to be better than the Heritage Foundation, right? So it can be a good thing, and I think it's not zero-sum necessarily. So if the two sides can figure out a way to realize that this isn't a zero-sum competition in economics, that we can both win in trade and investment and other areas of economics, then I think we may be able to find some way to at least tamp down these issues in the short term. But there are some deep problems here. China's subsidies of its state champions, its forced technology transfer policies, its limits of access to its market, and tilting the competitive playing field in favor of its interests. Those are really hard issues to solve, and I don't expect, given the way we're headed, that we're going to be able to find any kind of early resolution to that.
But if you look at it, right, it was good for business. Everybody profited from this, just like universities profited by allowing large numbers of Chinese students to come to the United States to study, to get that knowledge, and without an export license, take it back home, apprentice for an American company, for example, and then now, lo and behold, they have their own competitive industries that they've created. Ultimately, are the administration's goals clear? Because depending on who you talk to, they speak in terms of sort of, we're going to use this as an opportunity to break China, to retard its growth, for us to maintain an upper hand, as if you could somehow keep an economy that large and now that sophisticated down. Is the administration's goals clear enough? And are the administration's goals in the broad achievable if that's the goal of keeping China down?
Well, it doesn't make very good TV, but if you want a one-word answer, no. I don't think the goals are clear. And I, in fact, even think President Trump has a pretty different view from a lot of those people around him who are calling for, decoupling or weakening China's economy or something, which, again, I agree with you, are unrealistic. But I think President Trump, he's actually kind of on the traditional path of wanting to do a deal and sort of engage with China. He likes Xi Jinping. I think he wants to, try to figure out a way to get a deal that, deals with some problems he's worried about, the bilateral trade deficit. I don't think he wants to break China personally. But there are people around him, and then the broader, I think, policy community in Washington that are worried about the risks of of a China that is behaving the way it is, pushing out aggressively in the rest of the region, using economic coercion, using these tools of protecting its market and tilting the field in its favor, that feel that we really need to do something differently. And but I don't think, I don't think we can break China. I don't think we want to break China. Again, in my business, economics is win-win, and a weak China would be economically very damaging to us. And by the way, I think from a security point of view, a weak China would be a lot harder to manage than a strong China at the end of the day. So I think what we want is a strong, responsible China. And that means taking on some of these bad behaviors, and that's what I would want to do, but I don't think this administration has a coherent strategy.
And what's the right way to do that, right? I mean, there are folks in the Obama administration who were looking at this as being a problem. There were folks in the Bush administration who were looking at it. You were in the Clinton administration. There were people in the Clinton administration who were worrying about this and hoping that a WTO accession process, and once China was in the WTO, it would become a better or more responsible actor.
Yeah.
So if you were king for a day, what are the mechanisms and techniques you'd use to bring the Chinese to the negotiating table, get those protections on IP, get a more respectful policy at the end of the day?
Well, I think in a word, I would try and mobilize a coalition of people who are worried about China's behavior, and there are a lot of them. In fact, pretty much every other country has a problem with some of China's behavior in one way or another. Now, some don't want to, most don't want to walk away from China, don't want to break China, don't want to disengage, and don't want to choose between us and China for sure. But if you look at Japan, you look at European Union, you look at Australia, India, many countries around the region in particular, I think would want to work with us if we weren't poking them in the eye, first of all. And by the way, we're doing a lot of that with our tariffs against Japan and Korea and others. And if we were really trying to mobilize them into a coalition to say, look, we're not going to tolerate these massive subsidies, this tilting of the playing field in your favor, this theft of intellectual property, I think that would actually work. The Chinese do not want to be isolated, and they do pay attention to international voices that are united in saying that they're not doing the things the right way. I think there's a positive agenda too. If we had stayed in TPP, we would have, I think, really gotten China's attention. We did, and we were, I think, saying that the rest of the world's going off and setting rules and opening markets in this way. China, you can either join or not, but we're moving ahead, and I think that sent a very powerful signal. We're not doing any of that right now, so I think there's a lot we could do, but it's. And maybe, by the way, selectively using tariffs or other measures to try to slap China back when it's misbehaving, I think those are not inappropriate. I just don't like the broad-based tariffs that hurt, frankly, us more than they hurt the Chinese, and don't really focus on solving some of these specific problems. But using tactically some tough measures, I think is okay, as long as it's part of a coherent strategy that includes those other elements.
Let me ask you one last question. I remember my economics classes from Ira Marienhoff when I was in high school, and I paid attention to it, that you end up paying tariffs at the end of the day, not the other guy, as a general rule. But is there a danger that there is a concern among folks in the region, which I know you're familiar with, that this administration will trade a security agreement in exchange for a trade deal? Whether that's a Taiwan, where there are some concerns, or whether it's a Hong Kong. We've already seen the administration being very tough internally. Let's not talk a lot about democracy in Taiwan, Chinese troops mobilizing. What's the danger that the United States, is there a danger, is there a concern that the United States could make a security concession in seeking that kind of a trade deal? That, hey, China, if you just give me a comprehensive enough trade deal, I'll give you a little wider and freer hand in Asia. Is there a danger, and if so, what are the stakes for that kind of a cross-coupling from your standpoint?
I think that danger is there, but in fact, President Trump has suggested that he might be willing to, for example, go easy on Huawei, the telecommunications company that has been subject to these effective sanctions, if China gives him what he wants on trade. I think most analysts here would think that's really not a good idea and not smart to mingle those issues in that way. We have some specific concerns about Huawei. We need to pursue those and try to fix them or isolate Huawei if that's the only thing we can do. Throwing that into a trade negotiation seems like a really bad idea. let alone Hong Kong or Taiwan or something. I don't think that anybody would see that as a wise thing to do, and it is a source of concern that the president, because of his focus on trade in particular, may be willing to make other concessions that most presidents and most policy advisors would not recommend.
Matt Goodman of the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Always a pleasure, Matt. Thanks very much, and look forward to talking to you again soon, because I think this is going to be a story that's going to keep on giving.
I'm sure it will. Thanks very much, Vago. Appreciate it.